Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 19 of the Common Unity podcast. Today's episode has a special guest. Her name is Rochelle Nicole, and she's an absolute powerhouse of a woman. She has, at 34 years old, multiple businesses. She's a loving partner. She's a loving friend. She's devoted to family, and she's just devoted her life to God and living a life full of meaning and purpose. And if you knew a little bit about her childhood story, which we'll get into today, you never would have guessed her to turn that into something so amazing and something that is so admirable, and I'm excited to share her story with you today. So listen in, share, like, follow both myself and Rochelle to get more stuff like this, and I hope you take something out of today's episode. Enjoy, guys. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
This is really exciting. I have 1,000 questions to ask you, but obviously, we're here for a short amount of time, and I want to get the most out of our session today. Now, you have so much going for you with the way you're living your life right now. It's incredibly inspirational, and I'm excited to have you here on the channel to be able to just share what's going on and inspire people through the story that you've had, the story you're living, and the story that you want to be, and God's vision for you in the future. I think it's really amazing. So I want to start out by asking you straight out what your mission statement is, because you have quite a story, and we'll get into a bit of that, and you have your own podcast as well, which is cool, so people can go listen to that to listen to the full story. But yeah, what is your mission statement right here, right now? Like, what is it that you're about in your life?
So thank you for having me firstly. That was a lovely introduction. What I really hope to inspire people with is so my podcast is called The Evolved Lifestyle. Mm-hmm. And what I truly believe is that no matter what our childhood was or what we've even been through as adults, that we can evolve our lifestyle. We can evolve our mindset, our body, our soul, our living and our world. And so I just want to show people that it's possible no matter what you've been through or what you think your future is going to look like. You can change it at the drop of a hat. So that's
and you mentioned in your podcast, I've heard you say, okay, so you've got the evolved lifestyle. Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned lifestyle being, the things that were in our daily habits and everything, but you're looking at integrating the evolved aspect, which is the growing aspect.
Yeah.
So what is it that's incorporated into your lifestyle that every day helps you grow? Is that kind of the point of the evolved lifestyle?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I think a lot of people always think of lifestyle as health and wellness and fitness, and whilst that's a huge part of what I do, but I just truly believe it's the way you live, it's the way you treat people, it's the way you respect yourself, your body, your home, and for sure for me it's been my spiritual growth as well. So I've been on a spiritual journey for a really long time, but more so recently have been praying with God, and that's been a huge part of what I think has helped to evolve my lifestyle as well.
Yeah. So it's not so much just about these self-help fads or anything, and which are good for us, with gym, nutrition, and all that. But it's more the deeper spiritual side that's really drawn you to this big, I guess, like change in your life over the last, say, couple of years, 5 years maybe, where you've been able to turn around all the darkness that you've encompassed over the years, and move towards the light.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's only been 3 years since I came to faith, and for me it was a really dark side that I was at prior to that, and I don't think I could have survived it without it. So I know a lot of people either don't believe in God, or they don't believe in spiritual world, or they don't believe in a higher power, but I know that I couldn't have done it without that. I was at a really rock bottom place in my life where I was feeling super lonely and super depressed. I was traveling the world. On Instagram it looked like I had an amazing life. But I'd packed my suitcases, I left Australia, and I was just running away. But one of the biggest things I learned, that when you go, wherever you go, this goes with you. So if you're running and you're not fixing and healing your soul and your mind, then it's only going to catch up with you. And I was in America, I don't even know what year it was, 2016, 2017, and it all caught up with me. And I always say that God was chasing me. And if anyone's ever kind of encountered a godly moment, they'll know exactly what that means. But yeah, it caught up with me in America. And can I tell you a story?
Yeah, you can share. Yeah, this is your episode.
So I was sitting so I had a beautiful friend called Wendy, and she kept telling me about this Bible study, and I was like, no thanks, not a part of that. You know, it wasn't in my realm. For me, I was always like, the universe is guiding me. You know, I'm on this spiritual journey of healing, and now, anyway, I was in a place called Riverside, California, and she said, do you want to come to Starbucks with me this morning? No, she said, do you want to come to Bible study with me? And I was like, yeah, okay, not really, but I'll come with you. And I turn up and we're at a Starbucks, and I was like, what is this? And I walk in, there was like maybe 12 women just sitting around having coffee, and I was like, okay, I can dig this. I like coffee. And they just started going around the circle and talking about their lives. And it wasn't just all this beautiful amazingness, it was the hardship. And all they kept coming back to was God. And they had this like support and community and love. And I was like, wow. And then they got to me and they were like, what's your story? And I was like,
it all just came out.
Like, you know, I was broken. I was so broken. I was so lost. I didn't want to come back to Australia. I had nothing back here. I had no home. I had no possessions. And I did have a few possessions. They were in my ex-boyfriend's garage. Like, it was just crazy. And they just said to me, you know, like, Jesus loves you, and you know, if you want to take that on with you and take that back to Australia, how would that feel? And I was like, well, that would be great, you know, because it was just this little bit of hope of, well, it sounds crazy, but I've got nothing else, so I'll take it. And so it was a huge life-changing moment for me. I don't know if I would have survived otherwise.
Yeah.
So I kept back on the plane and I flew back. I got baptized 3 weeks later in a pool in California.
Oh, nice.
And I came back to Australia and it really was an evolved lifestyle change for me. It just switched everything for me. And I've definitely had challenges that have gone, you know, pulling me back a little bit and going forth, but it's always just me trying to step back into who I am and go, okay, where am I at with this? And, you know, does it line up with where I want my future to be? So, definitely if you're looking at an evolved lifestyle, health and wellness has always been a part of my life. I've worked in the fitness industry. I worked in the fitness industry for 7 or 8 years. I do coaching on the side. So that's always been there, but I've still also dabbled in things that are not health and wellness based. And I think since I found my spiritual sense of my lifestyle, that's been the game changer for me.
Yeah, wow. So that's quite interesting to me, because like what you've said is like over the years you actually have cared about your health and wellness, you know, being a personal trainer and having that sort of part of your life was like okay, I'm doing something, but then you're still engaging in all these other you know, activities that maybe weren't so good for your spirit, as you say. And one thing I'm curious to ask actually about you is, well, you mentioned that this moment where you went to this Starbucks cafe, and perhaps you should have led with, let's go for a coffee at Starbucks as opposed to Bible study. It might have been a bit more enticing.
Definitely.
Yeah, because we're also resistant to like our spiritual things or Christianity, or it's all woo-woo stuff, or maybe it's like, no, not for me. But I think people are afraid of tapping into the spiritual side because they're scared of what they might find. And usually it's the stuff we keep dug up underneath us.
Dig it down.
But God knows, or whatever higher power you believe in, which I believe all to be kind of the same, but you know, he knows, and he's like following you, as you said, he's chasing you. I would probably reframe that and say he was carrying you, because there's the footprint in the sand story, you know, when there was only one footprint, and God says that's when I was carrying you. So perhaps it was that.
I love that.
My question to you is, in that moment, I would imagine that prior to that, you would have been exposed to many opportunities to explore your spirituality, but there's something about that moment that drew you out, that you were ready for.
Yeah, that's so true. And when I look back now, I go, wow, like I call them seeds, like all the seeds that God was planting for me were all there along the way. And that's when I started becoming aware of it. And the universe is putting these people in front of me. And so even Dylan now always says, there's no coincidence. And there's not, you know, once you become more aware of who is put in front of you for what reason, and we're all connected for the same reason. And, you know, this person's onto your path for what is it that you're learning from that person, and why are they in your world, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know why that particular day was the day that I was like, ching, but I feel like it was everything leading up to it. And you know what was really cool? I was in California with Wendy, Wendy had come to Australia somewhat 10 years earlier to build a network marketing business. And she met a guy called Phil, who was her neighbor at the time. Phil then married my beautician like 5 years later, and my beautician introduced me to Wendy 10 years later. And so when you look back, we always say God had a plan, and it started way back here. And it was just when, and like those things make me go, wow. I love those stories. And so when you start to become open to what a higher power is leading you to, and we know that it's more than us, and you just start to flow with it and go with it, and you know that there's more to our lives and our future than what we ever could imagine.
And that's really amazing, because I think, you know, I certainly agree that coincidence is not really a thing. I believe that you need to be open to perceiving things in a way that makes sense to you. And so, for example, you're saying, okay, all these things happened and there was this connectivity 10 years ago. So yeah, God had a plan, you know, and even though I had no idea at the time, there was something in play. You could look at that 1,000 different ways and not integrate God and just say, oh yeah, it just happened. But now that you've opened the way, which is God's way, and through that, you know, even all the stories in the Bible that I'm finding, did Noah's Ark really happen? I'm not so sure, but every archetypical part of that story, or Adam and Eve or whatever, it means something because it makes sense, you know, in the story, and it makes sense for what each person represents in the story. And in your story, each person represented different parts of you, and you were exposed to different experiences that drew you closer to where you are now and where you're going. That's, to me, that's the big picture. That's the big picture that God has in play. And
I will just say on that, I know that a lot of people, and I get questioned a lot about it, and I love it. For me, it's not about the religion. It's not even about the history. For me, for now, because my journey, I feel, is still so new, for me, it's just that spiritual connection. And for me, it gives me faith and hope and peace that I don't have control over anything. And I pray a lot. I'll stand in my bathroom with my eyes closed and pray. And, you know, I pray for my family all the time, and I pray for their salvation. But for me, it just gives me hope. So that if you're, you know, I really want this job, or I really want to buy this home, or I really want to do this, I go, okay, God, it's all yours. Do what you're going to do. You know, I can't control it, but this is what my wish is, you know. And so for me, I'm definitely not a perfect Christian girl, and you know, because I don't know that side of things, but for me, it's just that faith and that spiritual journey. And so I think for a lot of people that would be nice to hear that you don't have to live up to this expectation of who people think you need to be. You know, I hear it all the time, like, oh, I wouldn't think you go to church. Why? You know, and what I really want people to know and feel, and I guess part of my mission is, it doesn't matter what you did in the past or even what you're doing now. You can make the decision to be saved, or to change, or to come to a faith standpoint and go, okay, I'm sorry I did all of that. You know, but this is where I want my life to go, and this is the changes that I want to make. Because I truly believe that most people that are living in a, I'll call it a sinful world, but in a way that it doesn't really line up with where they want to be. Most people do want to change, you know, whether it's drug abuse or alcohol abuse or physical abuse to themselves or other people. It's usually just trauma that they're trying to suppress, they haven't allowed themselves to then change and move forward, because most people would think, I can't, I'm too far gone. Like, how many people say, oh, if I walked into a church, it would catch on fire? And I always just say, everyone says that. You know, like, and it's just not true. It's just not true. And I think that if people were to look at it just from a spiritual perspective, you know, it's just a beautiful space where you can come and just let it all go, and it just gets lifted off your shoulders.
But the thing is that's quite fascinating here is, you mentioned, like, when you were with those women in that Starbucks, you know, while it wasn't quite a church setting, it was the church, because the church is the people, not the actual place, right? And so you're in this environment where all these women were sharing quite vulnerable things about themselves, and that almost gave you permission to just open it up and let it out without judgment. So there's something amazing about that safe space that was created there that day, and exposing yourself to multiple people and being welcomed with love.
They were so beautiful. Like, I just remember thinking, these women are amazing. And I have just looked at them with so much strength. I was like, they have so much strength. Like, there was women there that were surrogates, some that couldn't fall pregnant, some that had biological kids that had disabilities. There was women who'd had sexual assault in their life. Like, every story was like, wow. And yet they had faith. They get up every day, they had faith. And I was like, this is phenomenal. Like, it was honestly life-changing that day. And I know that God brought them all together there. And I know Wendy was probably in a group chat going, ladies, you need to come to this Starbucks and save this girl with me. You know, I have no doubt in that now that I look back.
Yeah.
But I'm so grateful, like so grateful to hear their stories and for their church to come together. And as soon as I came back to Australia, I was like, where is my life group? Where is my group of women? And I went to a few different churches and didn't, you know, I was like, not my place, not my place. And then I actually, if you were to think about like hearing, like seeing signs, I kept hearing about Riverside at Gosford, which is where like there's a dental practice and a church and stuff. Well, if you remember, it was Riverside, California, where I was at that Starbucks. And I came back to Australia because I've been traveling a while. I came back to Australia, moved back to the Central Coast. And I remember months earlier, I'd come back to the Central Coast, or maybe years earlier, and I was like, oh, it's so dark here. I don't want to be here. I don't want to live here. Went away probably 4 or 5 years of living in London, living in Sydney, traveling. Came back to the Central Coast after I'd been saved, and I was like, it's so beautiful and bright here. Like, all of a sudden, this had changed.
Yeah.
And I saw the Central Coast in a different perspective. And I was like, okay, I love being here. Where am I going to live? What am I going to do? And I started hearing about this Riverside, and I was like, what the heck is Riverside? Like, I know it as California. Oh my gosh, there's a place in Gosford now, because it had only been developed over those years. And then I kept hearing about Darlene Check, who just happened to be a woman who owns the church in Gosford. And it was just, anyway, it was leading me there. I kept hearing it on the radio, seeing the signs. And New Year's Eve 2017, it must have been, I was at home. I was going through another pit of probably depression and sadness and loneliness. I'd been through another breakup. And I just went to this church at Gosford on New Year's Eve on my own. And I remember walking in, and this woman said, you look lost. And I was like, I've never been here. And she goes, do you want to sit with me? And I said, yes, please. She walked me to the front row, and I was like, oh. And I just sobbed. I was just crying so much. And I can't remember what the message was, but I just remember crying. And I remember at the end, they, you know, does anyone want prayer? Or, you know, if you just need to hand everything over today. Like, and I was like, hands in the air, and I'm sobbing. And I think back now, I think, God, I must have stood out so much. But nobody cared. Yeah. You know, and I guess that, you know, you talked about the ladies in America being the community and the church. I just always, every time I'm sad or every time I'm at church, I just know that people will place their hands on you and pray with you. And I've never had that my whole life, that where people that don't even know you just love you and want to pray for you and just want the best for you. And so then I went to Gosford Hope UC for maybe a year, and then I moved and I went up to Charmhaven, and I just one day, actually I heard this lady preach. And I left, and then I was like, I really want to go tell her that was a great message. And so I went back in and I said, hey, that was really amazing. Like, it spoke to me. I think you really speak well. I just wanted to let you know. And she's like, thank you so much. And she said, I wanted to introduce you to my friend Cass. She said she actually has a life group around here. I think you'd love it. And I just got connected with this group of women. So I've been friends with them for 2 years now, and they are honestly my life. Like, they are my church. Yeah. And if, you know, somebody's unwell in the group chat, who's making meals this week? You know, let's pray for this person. Let's do this. Who can step up and do this? It's just, that is my life group, and it is my church, and the women are amazing. And we're not, definitely, there's none of this perfection. We all have different beliefs, and I love that as well. You know, we meet up every second week for our Bible study, which is hilarious now that I'm like, hey, but it's not about that. It's just like, here's the message. And we always go off on a tangent, talk about everything. But and no one judges each other for having different beliefs. And if we've got a friend, hey, I've just met this woman, I think she really needs us. Bring her along, she'll come along. And it's just the most beautiful community and safe space for people that are all on the same mission of just wanting to live a life full of faith rather than fear. And it's been life-changing for me to have found that in America, and then blissfully found it in Australia as well.
Yeah, because you talk a lot about having, you know, the people around you are basically going to make you a product of the people. Well, the people around you will be the influence for you. You know, so if you surround yourself with people who are going to be that influence, then you're more likely to be drawn towards where you should be going, I guess, based on your own beliefs. So this stems into the next question of, like, I'm curious as to, I mean, I know a bit about your story, but what is it about your story growing up? You know, because you mentioned now you can expose yourself to, you know, your most vulnerable core and be welcomed with love and faith and hope, but your story doesn't quite replicate that at all. So let's hear a little bit about your story. I mean, if anyone wants to listen to the full sort of thing, they can either read this part of the book that you can plug in a moment, or, you know, go to your podcast, Evolved Lifestyle. But yeah, share a little bit about your story coming into now, because that, to me, that environment and being able to shift and be in this new environment, I mean, what a polar life. I just, it's quite a unique one. So yes, I'm going to hand over to you. Share a little bit about that for us.
Okay, so yeah, I remember when at the beginning of the year, I co-authored a book. It took all of last year, actually, all of 2019. It was released in 2020 in March, flew over to the UK. So I co-authored a book with 18 other women.
What's it called?
It's called Notes to My Younger Self.
Let's show it to the camera.
So it's a pay it forward series, Notes to My Younger Self. So it's actually volume 3. So a lady called Kezia Luckett is a positive psychologist over in the UK, and she coached 18 women in series 1, 18 women in series 2, and 18 women in series 3 to go back to their childhood, find pivotal moments in their life, and then write a letter back to their younger self and publish it. So it's a phenomenal book of not just my story, but 18 other women. And you can imagine 18 women from around the world. Like, we've all lived very, very different lifestyles. Like, you picture someone who's lived in Europe as opposed to Jamaica and America and Australia and the UK. And I was blessed to be asked to be in the book because one of the authors in series 2 knew me. She said, you have to listen to Rochelle's story. So when I started writing the book, I thought my pivotal moment was one particular moment, but I actually realized throughout writing it that I had 4 or 5, as most people would, because there comes a time in your life where you have usually 2 choices. It's either going to go this way or this way. And sometimes we control it and know where we're going, and other times something takes us there. And one of my cousins read this book, and she said, at first I really hated that you gave all praise to God for this. She said, you actually are the one. And then she said, but as I read to the end, I realize now why you said that, because I have no other explanation how I would have survived my childhood. So my dad was a drug dealer, quite a heavy drug dealer on the Central Coast. And my mum became a drug addict at 41 years old. So I was 12. I was living with my dad, who was in and out of jail. Forever having drug addicts come to our house to buy drugs from him, and my mum had left. And it was, 12 years old as a girl. It was the most pivotal moment in my life. And if you go to my Instagram or my podcast, I always talk about my period and period proud. And the reason I do that, and I talk about it in front of men or whoever, is because I got my period when I was a week off 13 in a drug addict's house with my dad. I had to go out asking for $5 to go buy tampons. It was like, and he was cool. Yeah, hey, do you know what to do? Here's $5. Like, yeah, no worries. And I walked to the local shopping center on my own, like in the middle of the dark. You know, it's just crazy when I look back at that.
Yeah.
But I guess the things that I carried through my whole life was that it was my fault my mum left. So my mum actually met another man at that same time. So my dad was trying to go to rehab, but he was in and out of jail. He was really struggling to get away from his addiction. And my mum left and then met another man who was a drug addict. And so he then got my mum addicted to drugs. So I had 2 drug addict parents. I lived in 7 different homes from year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then when I was 18, I got my first rental. Visited my dad religiously. I absolutely adore my dad and supported his every move, because I guess the difference between my mum and my dad was my mum lied a lot about everything, where my dad was always honest. So even though the truth hurt, a lot of what my dad would say, he was always honest with me. So I respected that. Wow. So I look back now and I go, okay, it was crazy. You know, I would get on a train and travel down to the jail in Sydney and visit my dad on a Sunday, and then I would come back. And when I was in my 20s, I had a fiance, and I remember I used to go watch him play football, and I would go sit at the field, hoodie on, and people thought I was really rude. Like, who is this rude girl? But they didn't know I'd just been sitting in a jail with my dad an hour earlier. Like, it was just me that was just dealing with my stuff. And I guess that, you know, in this whole scheme of God and Jesus thing, when these women in America were like, God is a father and he loves you and he's the person that's always loved you and he's always been there for you, it made sense to me. because I didn't have a father that was there for me. And my dad loves me, I have no doubt, but he doesn't love me like a dad should, or he doesn't show the behaviors of what he should. And so I just had to be strong my whole life, like just keep going, you know. And I always pictured myself as a little soldier. Like even when I lived in London, it was so hard and it was raining and it was cold and but I was so stubborn and determined, and I'd put my hoodie on and I'd just, like a little soldier. And I guess since I've come back to Australia and I really feel like I've been able to stop running, you know, the chapter in this book is called When You Stop Running. And I really feel like I've been able to just stop and be grounded and stop running. And it's a really, really nice feeling. I can't remember what you asked me now.
Oh, no, just like just
my
like
story,
a snapshot of the story. But
yeah.
I mean, one thing you just mentioned there is interesting. So you mentioned like I just stopped running, and now there's a sense of relief that's washed over you, and you're able to actually, you know, well, you seem to really have a pretty clear idea. While, you know, you mentioned you're not perfect, and none of us are, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you're still working on certain aspects. It's not like you just turn the corner and all of a sudden you're some sort of angel. Like, you know, you've got to work on things, and things will trigger you and bring up past things. And but what you're talking about now is that, well, yeah, there's this sense of like, relief that's washed over you. You've turned and you've faced some things. You've written letters to your younger self, and really, you know, I know a lot from my studies as a counselor about, you know, dealing with traumas and turning and really facing it in a safe setting. You know, maybe you work with a psychologist or a therapist, or maybe it's a best friend, or maybe it's someone at the church or whoever, right?
Yeah.
You turn and you face it, and you make sense of it by saying, okay, well, perhaps maybe it wasn't your fault. And, you know, like you were just an innocent child brought into a malevolent world, and these things were just what was dealt to you.
Yeah.
Now, through that, like one thing that's fascinating about that is like, I wonder how much of that fuels you today to keep doing things in more of a positive light. So while you mentioned, oh yeah, I was a soldier and I had to really, you know, push on through all these dark times, you know, especially when you were traveling and all these things, like you really use that as like, you know, I got to be strong, because if I'm weak, then, or, you know, things will be worse, right? So there's almost a level of fear there.
Yeah.
But now that fear has turned into faith. So now you can use that as, okay, I know I've faced the beast and the multiple beasts. It's like a nine-headed dragon. You've faced that, each aspect, and while it hasn't disappeared, it's there lurking, so you know that you can kind of move forward. So like, I'm wondering how that plays a part in your life now. All those horrible traumatic experiences, the relationship, you know, like conflict and like distortion, like how does that play in your life now?
Yeah, and talking about the monster that hasn't disappeared, it definitely hasn't. So sadly, my dad was 10 years sober at one stage. He hadn't touched drugs or clean, 10 years clean and sober, hadn't touched drugs, and all of a sudden about a year and a half ago became a drug addict again, which absolutely shatters my heart. And I pray for him. I prayed for him this morning. You know, I pray for him every day, but there comes a point in your life where you have to disconnect to some extent, because otherwise it's going to own your future and your life and your children. And I want to be a mum so bad, and you know, I now have a partner who's amazing, and I have the choice to either take my past and my childhood into my children's life, or I can break that chain of what's gone on in my childhood with my parents and with their parents. And one of the most beautiful things I did was forgive my mum and have a conversation with her about, hey mum, this is what you did to me, this is how it felt. But every time I went to do it, it never happened. And then one day it happened, but I'd been through this stage of life where I actually saw why she did that, and I saw it from her side. And I was like, hey mum, I really wanted to be angry at you for not being there when I got my period, for not being a mum that could take me shopping, for not being there when I went to school, when I had my first boyfriend. Like, my mum was not there for anything of all those years. But then I was like, hey, but she also had this happen to her, and this happened to her, and this happened to her, that led her to that point. She didn't want to become a drug addict. She didn't want to lose the love of her life. She still loves my dad. And she didn't want to lose her 4 kids, and she didn't want to be on the streets, and she was abused massively by her partner. But credit to her, she's still with him. Yeah. So it's been 20 plus years, and I've now accepted him into our world. Again, he wasn't accepted, but as soon as I forgave them and let go, it just is like a release. And when you can see pain and hurt from somebody else's perspective and why they've projected that to you, that was just their past traumas, you know, bringing it forward. So something that I've really worked super hard on over the last few years is just drawing that line in the sand of like, I'm not going to bring this forth. And one of my brothers has sadly followed in my dad's footsteps, and I look at his kids and it breaks my heart. I'm like, they're living the life that we lived as kids. But I always say to my oldest niece, you don't have to be like this, you know, like this. And she always says things like, oh, I've got this because we got it from that side of the family. I'm like, like it stops. And I'm almost 35 and I haven't become a mum yet because I never wanted to be like my mum. I always had fear that I would become a drug addict and leave my kids when they were 12. Always. That was like a story I told myself. You're gonna have kids and you'll be a mum, and then you're gonna be 12 and they're gonna be 12 and you're gonna leave them. I drilled that into my own head. I had to let go of that. And now I truly know, like since writing this book and since writing the letter back to my younger self and releasing all of that that's not my story. Like you can rewrite your story, you can evolve your lifestyle, you can evolve your life and your world by just literally knowing that you can cut that chain and leave that behind. But I still have a great relationship with my mum and dad. But not without boundaries. I've really had to set boundaries for both of them to protect my own heart, protect my own future, protect my relationship. So if I was to dive into my current relationship a little bit, my partner was drinking and taking drugs when we first met, from a party, very, you know, I guess what society allows as party scene and whatever.
Culturally accepted.
Like totally accepted, almost a given that that's what everyone does. And I didn't know that it was a trigger for me or that it was a non-negotiable for me until it was in my world again. So I'd worked all these years, got rid of it, no drug abuse, no alcohol abuse, after me doing it for many years as well. Take a step back, let it all go, and then meet someone that I fall in love with, and then it's in my world big. And I'm like, wait, I can't do this. And I had to look at it. Is it a trigger? Is it something that I can deal with? Is it something that I want to accept? Is it a compromise or is it a non-negotiable? And I think that's one of the things I've had to learn with relationships over the last few years is what are your non-negotiables? What is something that absolutely pulls at your soul and your core that you cannot bring into this relationship? Or what is it that is maybe just triggering you that you need to deal with? And my partner is amazing and resilient, and I've never had that. I say it to him all the time. I've never had somebody fight for me, and he does always. And he is now 14 weeks sober, has zero intention of ever taking drugs or having a drink again, which is phenomenal. And, you know, while some people say, is he going to stick to that? 100%. I always knew that he was strong enough to do it, but he had to make the decision to do it. So we broke up not long ago and I was done. I was like, I knew in my core there was no way I was having it in my life. There's no way it's going to be in my children's life. And I was well and truly happy with my decision to break it. You know, I loved him, but I'm sorry, I can't have this in my life. And he started going to church and he started praying, and he was just, and I'm looking at him over there like, really, you do this now? Like, you wait till we break up? But he was sobbing. And then for 3 weeks at church, the sermon was about transformation of life. And, you know, if you can't keep living the life the way that it is right now, just leave it at the foot of the cross, like give it all up. And here's this boy who had been challenging my spirituality and my beliefs for the whole 2 years. And he's just in church bawling and his hands are in the air. And it was the most beautiful thing to watch. Although at the time I was like, ugh. Because I didn't know if to believe it or trust it yet. I was like, there's more to this, you know. I didn't want him to do it for me.
Well, there's a sense of you that's trying to protect yourself by thinking, oh no, it's too good to be true. Yeah, this is unfamiliar territory for me.
I'd been praying for that for 2 years.
Yeah.
You know, and he even said, he goes, for 2 years he'd been coming and he'd been watching people do it and thinking, what is going on? And he said, but whatever was going on with him, he goes, I couldn't even control it. It was just like, and he still doesn't even know what it was, you know, and the message was for him. The message was about leaving a life of possibly addiction behind and coming forth with something that it just said, if you can't If you don't know how to do life anymore, if you don't know how to change, just give it all. And I was like, one of the girls messaged me, she said, you can't fake that. And I was oh no, like, you know, he was the most vulnerable I'd ever seen him. But for me, it just showed resilience. It showed he was ready for change. It was showing he was like just giving it all up, because sometimes we live in this lifestyle of the social norm that we don't know how to live any other way. He also had this mask of the fun guy, the party guy, the wild one. How do you know? You don't know how to live another way if that's always been your characteristics. If that's the mask you've always worn, how do you be this other person? So I love that he has stepped up in that sense, but I also know that I had to deal with my own triggers and work out, was it something triggering me? Was it something I could compromise on? Or was it something that I was not willing to negotiate on? And I did all that with a psychologist. She's been amazing. And I actually had a list of all the things I wanted my future husband and father of my children to be. And she said, do you think it's fair that you're putting him in this box of you have to be like this? And so what I had to learn was there's characteristics you might like someone to have, but they don't have to have them all. They don't have to be in this perfect box. But you can have your non-negotiables, the things that really challenge your soul. And I think if you can get to know what the differences are in those, then that's what's important in a relationship. I started a little group on Facebook not long ago called Soulmates, and it was purely just for me to try to bring my beautiful single friends together, because I feel like everyone's struggling these days to navigate dating apps and love and dating and world and single parents and all these things that, but I'd hear from my male friends that are looking for a good woman, and I'd hear from my women friends. But I put in there the other day pretty much that, know what your non-negotiables are, but stop trying to fit this person, this ideal person, into this box. They must be tall, they must do this, they must do that. Your perfect person could be none of those things. And God's got this beautiful plan for you, and you're praying for this person to come, but you've put them in this box. So take away the box, know what your non-negotiables are, but also work out what's triggering you from a perspective that maybe you just need to heal some past stuff.
These non-negotiables you talk about, they seem to me like values, like there are character traits that will change as you grow up and you mature and everything, and as you realize things, but values are very difficult, and beliefs are very difficult to change from when you grew up, and not to say it's impossible, but like when you mention non-negotiables, it's like no, sorry, this is a thing where, like, if you and I can't agree now, it's a very low chance. Not impossible, nothing's impossible, a very, very low chance, and that to me is so important that it's worth noting. And then the other things are character traits where, like, okay, that's just something that they react to, and maybe they might change, and do they have an intent to change? Maybe that's another value, right? Because knowing something's wrong and wanting to actually help yourself and change that is a value, I think, rather than just, going about the daily motions and things like that. Now, I'm curious about, you talk about the amount of effort you've put into, like, working your relationships, your spiritual side, and, your professional side and your playful side, like all these things. Like this is life management. This is something that we often all really negate, because like we just focus on all the external things of appeasing other people and my boss and my family, like doing things to satisfy other people. But it takes work, and I'm genuinely surprised at the amount of people who don't ever just sit down and just try and become familiar with themselves. Like you've done it through, say, prayer, through maybe meditation, through therapy, like all these different things. I mean, what more could be worth putting time in than yourself in that sense, if you think about it? And then, like, even, for me, like with relationships, if I'm choosing to be in an intimate relationship, I'm willing to put just as much, if not more, work into that than my business life or my, other life, because that's so important to me and it takes work. And so you have to, like, prepare for the potential storms that are coming, and, and this is what it sounds like you've really had to do, really map things out and go, okay, this is what I want to attract, and this is why, and this is what I'm, not running from, but this is the darkness that I used to have, which I know what I'm not wanting to go back to. So it's kind of interesting to me with these non-negotiables. And I guess my question to you here is, for anyone else listening who's like just started dating someone maybe, or looking to date someone, how do you identify the difference between, and like, okay, this is a red flag that I need to run from, and okay, that's something that is maybe a personality defect in my opinion, but it seems to be something that might be able to change? Like, how do you know the difference, and how can you, because there's a level of like no, I'm not even going near that because that's a part of you that's too dangerous. Or, you know what, actually, that seems to be worth working through because we're not all perfect.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you, what do you think there on that?
It's really interesting. I think when you say the word that's too dangerous, I think sometimes like, you know, there was always that girls go for bad boys thing.
Yeah,
and
that's
I think,
attractive.
you know, but I
ways.
think that's also a something you have to sit and look at yourself and go, okay, why am I attracted to this bad boy? Why am I attracted to this bad thing? I think sometimes we don't know or think that we deserve a good life. And I think self-sabotage is huge. And I really feel like sometimes we push people away because they're too good. And we attract the bad because we're like, this is where there's the adrenaline here. You know,
it's familiar.
Yeah, it's,
I would say
especially they're definitely familiar.
Yeah.
You know,
that's how you've experienced love growing up. You know, it's chaotic. It's you know, it shows itself in different ways. So you're more likely to think that that's normal.
Yeah.
But then you realize that, well, maybe it doesn't have to be normal, right?
Totally. I actually was do teeth whitening, cosmetic teeth whitening.
Yes.
And I was down in Sydney a few weeks ago whitening. There was 4 girls. They were just 18. And ended up talking love and relationships because they were talking about these boys they were dating and they were taking drugs and all this. Actually, a pastor's daughter. And she was just rebelling. She was just rebelling because she'd been told this other life so much. And I said to her, there was this other guy that liked her, and it was really interesting to hear them talk about it. But she goes, I said, oh, what about him then? And she goes, oh, he's too nice. I said, oh, babe, please. I said, the amount of too nice guys that have come and gone, I promise you want a nice guy, you know, because I don't know whether, we chase the adrenaline, we chase the rush, we chase all of these things, but then they always say the nice guy never wins, but they should, because we live in a world where we see what other people have either through social media, either that bad boy lifestyle or the tattoos and all of whatever, but sometimes that's just a broken boy that is wanting, you know, to be saved or healed as well. And I guess looking for triggers or looking for red flags, you have to trust your gut intuition in a relationship. So I know that one of the biggest things we do is we put a wall up to protect ourselves, but you can't just always bring your past relationships or your past, and I'm talking relationships intimately or with your family, you can't bring that forth, because I did it many years, I know, bring that forth and to protect yourself always in a sense of trying not to then fall again. I think vulnerability, and I was saying it in my soulmates group the other day, I think vulnerability is a beautiful thing. And I think if you can let that wall down and fall in love, even if you get hurt and fall in love again and fall in love again, because all of those experiences is what's going to grow you into the person that you're meant to be growing into. But if we just always have a wall up, we're always cranky, we're always this, love's not going to work, what's the point? You know, I think the most beautiful saying ever is it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all.
I love that,
Yeah, and I just think that if you can put yourself out there over and over again, and of course, don't ignore the red flags.
Yeah.
So one of the girls the other day messaged me and she said, I tried to talk to this guy in the group and he didn't really want a bar of it. And I was like, she sent me the screenshots of the comment. I said, yeah, he didn't really give you much. I said, that's okay, next. She goes, to be honest, when I was looking at the photos, I didn't think it would really gel. And I said, so why did you ignore that red flag and still continue? Like they were chalk and cheese. They were not compatible. Even just, you know, and I just was like, don't ignore that red flag. You know, I commend him for not progressing that conversation because he knew that it wasn't compatible.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I think there's ignoring red flags. I think there's listening to your intuition. I think there's also that element, like you were saying before, a lot of people don't just sit with themselves. Sit with yourself. Write your list. Like write the list of traits that you want in a human, but also write the list of what you're willing to give. Like I know what I bring to the table. And for many years, I always told myself I didn't deserve a good person. I wasn't, you know, I wasn't deserving of love. I was this, I was that. I told myself so many horrendous stories about myself that I had to rewrite all of that in my head. What do I bring to the table? But I also had to be that person. So I went on a huge personal development journey. When I traveled through London and when I traveled through America and when I did that was for me to grow and develop as myself. So I, you know, immersed myself in personal development. I stopped hanging around people. Your circle of influence is massive. So you can either influence that circle or you can leave the circle. And sometimes I feel like you need to leave the circle, work on yourself, and then you could possibly go back into that circle and influence them, or you need to cut ties. And I feel like that was a really, really big part of what I did. So now I can sit with myself and go, okay, this is what feels right to me. These are the people I want to surround myself with. And sometimes people will come into my world or my circle and I try and I'm like, well, this does not feel right. And I cut it. Just cut it. Like doesn't matter who it is. Even I've had to cut my family. You know, I've only just let my brother back in after years and years and years of hurt because of his drug abuse and in and out of jail and things like that. And I used to think, well, I wouldn't let you into my life if you weren't my brother. So I'm sorry, I can't let you in as my brother. And, you know, only through his proof and showing me of what the person that he now wants to be, I let him back in. But you always have to protect yourself and just sit with yourself.
So what you're talking about here then, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it's that level of self-love you're talking about. So, you know, you mentioned, okay, well, what am I bringing to this circle, right? You didn't say, okay, what is it? Like, these people are not, like, bringing anything to me, right? Yeah, maybe that's an aspect and maybe they're influencing you in a bad direction, but your immediate instinct seems to be now like, oh, you know, what am I bringing or what am I not bringing? And so you take a step back and you work on yourself, you figure it out, and maybe you realize, okay, maybe there's nothing I can bring to that community and I need to find a different entourage, different group of friends or something. But the other side of it is, oh, okay, well, if I bring the best person I can be to my relationships, friendships, intimacy, like family, if I just bring the best person I can be, then the rest of are willing, well, usually will then follow that, right? Because you're living a desirable life. And sometimes it's not so much about saying, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that. It's like, okay, well, I value this and I'm making these changes and doing these things daily or weekly, and they're showing like exponential results. Like I'm happier, I'm healthier, I'm more clear on my direction in life and blah, blah, blah. And then that's going to be desirable. So that to me is a big thing that's stood out in that story. So it's about really taking that step back, looking inwards first rather than outwards for your own satisfaction, happiness, contentment, whatever you want to call it. So that's kind of interesting to me.
And it's really interesting you say that. I said to a girl just the other day, I was at a high tea in Terrigal on Sunday and I met this beautiful girl and we were talking about being surrounded by people that are sometimes not very nice to you, either other girls in a group that you've just joined, etc. And she said to me that she had to stop going to the gym. And I was like, you need to get back into it. You need to set your alarm, get your clothes ready, night before, put them out, alarm goes off, you go to the gym. And I said, you won't be jealous of those other girls when you're living your best self. Because you cannot be confident and walk in faith with yourself that you either deserve that guy or it doesn't matter. But because if you're feeling so good in yourself, you'll know where you stand. And he either steps up and loves you for who you are, or he continues to give that girl attention. But if you're being your most confident self, you won't care either way. Because you're either going to go, hey, you're not worthy of my time, or he's going to be so attracted to you for being this confident, amazing, incredible, strong woman that he's like, what was I thinking? And she was like, I'm setting my alarm and going to the gym in the morning. You know, but I think it's just such when you can work on yourself and be your best version, then jealousy goes, confidence comes, and you start to live for yourself and know that you'll either attract people in and push away what doesn't work.
Yeah, that's kind of the organic law of attraction in some ways, isn't it? Like if you live a desirable life, you'll attract the better parts of people out.
Yeah.
And then, you know, that may help motivate them. And then in turn, you're motivated by what they're doing because maybe this person does start really getting up every day and actually going to the gym for the right reasons. And you're now going, wow, that's really
and it's not to look this way or do it's for your mental health, it's for your confidence, it's for self-love, it's to, you know, applaud yourself for your body being able to do what it can do. It's not about punishment or anything like that.
It's about discipline, which is delayed gratification. You know, like you know, if I put this work in every single day, it is work. Delayed gratification and work are the same thing. I'll do something now for a greater future. And if you're putting the work into yourself, the best thing about, I guess, physical workout stuff is that if every day I put in the work, I will slowly actually see the benefits because I can see my body changing and I can feel my body changing. And so there's something amazing about that if I can change that, what else can I change?
Yeah, that's right.
And then it might be business, then it might be, you know, your mission in life or relationships.
Clean your house. It's all the things that sometimes we get so lazy doing, all of that just flows. The way you eat, the way you do business, the way your mind thinks, the way you treat people, all of it flows from discipline. Yeah.
And actually, to come back to one other thing you said, which is kind of like, it relates to my mission and one of my missions, which is to inspire young men, I would say, and potentially teenage men, boys. So you mentioned being attracted to the bad boy, Now that stood out for me because I think I figured out, like I've been doing a lot of research and study into different things, but in this one I figured out what that might be. And I think it is, there's this idea of, okay, the bad boy brings something that's so attractive, and there's this danger, there's this, we're interested in it, which is why I think our ancestors thousands of years ago were interested in fire, because fire was this like element that we couldn't control. Yet, like if you go around a bushfire, like a campfire, sorry, would you find that you just sit there looking at the fire, mesmerized by it? Absolutely. There's something about it, but but if you touch it, it will burn you. So what's that all about, right? So there's something organic about the danger that we're attracted to.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding of what, more specifically men, I think women can do this too. What we should be doing is finding that real balance between, I'm capable of true damage if I want to. We're all born as like little aggressive beings, I would say. I mean, look at any terrible 2-year-old. That's the reason, like when they get to 2, they just want to break things and destroy things and test boundaries and all that. That's because like it's kind of innate to us to want to go for destruction. Actually, there's a few stories in the Bible that replicate that, but I won't go into it. But the point here that I'm making is that if that's a part of us, we know that doesn't actually ever lead somewhere really great. The thing we want to do is know that part of us is what we use to drive us to do good things. Okay, so I'm capable of true damage if I want to, but I'm not going to. I'm going to choose to use that power and that motivation for goodness. And there's something that's what I think the balance should be, and that comes in boundaries and things like that as well. Like we need to say, okay, well, no, I will not let that person come close to me because I know the danger, and I'll stand my ground. And you show yourself, you puff your chest out or whatever and say, no, you stay away. Like that's the power, but not the next level, which is like inflicting pain on people purposefully or whatever, purely for your own satisfaction. So my mission is to find what it is about you that has any reason to be aggressive or reason to be like, to cause havoc and wreak havoc. Because sure, it's interesting. It's fun, isn't it? It'd be boring if it was just easy every day. You eat food, you go to the gym. Like that's boring. People want something interesting, but you can use that and do something like more meaningful with your life, because it takes a bit of power and a bit of courage to do something meaningful. So why not use that and do that? So that's kind of like really resonated with me, what you said there. And then in turn, that's what women seem to be attracted to. This bad boy, but we know he's using it for good. I mean, what better could you want for someone who's like that, right? You get the best of both worlds.
I think it comes back to self-worth. I think it comes back to potentially if the bad boy is showing his bad side, and women, bad girl, it's that this person thinks that's all they're worthy of. That they're not worthy of a beautiful, good, calm life, and or used to it. So they just always think, well, this is all that there is. They're used to the danger. They like the danger. They're just going to drown it all out with drugs and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. Like I remember when I was really deep in my drug use, and I don't think I spoke about it very briefly, but I solidly took drugs for 2 years, and I was just masking pain. Like I didn't have my family. My sister had kids, my brothers had kids, and I was just the single girl still. I'd left my fiance because I wasn't happy, and I just took drugs every weekend. I had a great job, and I was in a fitness industry. I wasn't a PT, mind you. No, that's okay. No,
that wrong,
I was manager of gyms, and I loved working in the fitness industry. I loved it. And so I think that's what always just kept me just not going too far. But I was bad. I had a really bad drug addiction, but it was something I always knew I had hold of. I used to say to myself every Monday morning, you've got this. This is not going to take hold of you. You've got this. And I obviously just had to get through something in my life. And I said to you before, I'm actually somewhat grateful because I know that I'm not going to become a drug addict at 40 like my mom. I know I won't. And so perhaps that was part of my journey that I just had to go on. But, there was that adrenaline, that there was that naughty girl side of me that just kind of had to play its part because I didn't think I was worthy of anything more at that time. But I didn't know any other life either. So
well, that's right. It's familiarity. Like it's familiar to have that chaos and to have that unstable psyche going on and around you. That's naturally probably going to attract more unstable people as well, because that's attractive to
Yeah,
them,
it's like
they're also in the
you
same
make me
boat.
feel good about myself because you're just doing the same thing.
Exactly, it normalizes those behaviors, doesn't it? And the flip side of that is, if you can surround yourself with the good people, like maybe this women's group that you sat with at Starbucks, or maybe the people you've created here in your circle. If I'm around those people, then we're all just going to lift each other up, and be, through the authenticity of like, okay, I'm not perfect, and this is what's wrong with me, but this is what I'd like to change, and you welcome them with open arms. I mean, even in like therapeutic environments, like self-help groups are so powerful. Like, you got drugs and alcohol anonymous and gamblers anonymous and all those types of different groups. There's something so powerful about what happens in those rooms when people will sit with other people who have had the same types of experiences and thoughts, knowing that, hey, I'm not alone, right? Because that feeling of loneliness and like I'm a little bit messed up and there's no hope for me. You can hear other people's stories and realize you're not the only one going through it.
And I think that's why I talk about things so openly, because like I was suicidal for a couple of years where I was just so lonely, and that's why I talk so openly about God and my spiritual journey now, because it's powerful, I think, to talk about the fact that you were going to take your life, because it's so common, sadly. But I think if more people talk about it, they go, okay, well, I either have an option, or I didn't have anyone to go. People always go, I've got no one. Well, I had no one either, and that's why I chose God, because I was like, well, it's all I've got left, it's the only choice I've got. But if you don't talk about it, you don't open yourself up. I mean, even with my partner, like Dylan, I encourage him to talk about his journey and the fact that he's now stopped drinking, because I think that's going to be so inspirational for so many people. He follows a bunch of guys on Instagram who always talk about becoming sober. And without that, I don't think he would have ever known that he could then become sober, because when I told everyone, he stopped drinking, everyone's like, that's not possible. And I'm like, well, it is, because we have these two guys in our circle and they've done it. And so because Mick has done it and because Trav has done it, it then made it possible for Dylan to do it. And I say to him, I think when Dylan's ready, he'll share his story, because when he starts to share that, it will then be possible for somebody else. And I love that. I think that's a really powerful side of being vulnerable and sharing your story to either a community or whoever it is that you end up sharing it to. And not everyone will want to make that change, but there are a lot of people that do. I have no doubt. And so that's, I guess, where this evolved lifestyle came in, because I wanted to start doing a podcast that shared where my story has come from and where it's going, and how I've done that. So that's kind of where that all eventuated from.
Yeah. And that level of just kind of being an open book, and that can show itself in different ways for different people. I mean, you seem very happy just exposing your whole story to the world almost, and that's really admirable and really courageous of you to do that, because we know why you're doing it. You're doing it to help others, but also it also helps you, I would imagine, and it helps keep you accountable and keep you drawing towards the direction you should be going in. But I guess for other people, being an open book looks different. Maybe it's too much to go and broadcast yourself out there. Maybe the first step is just to start journaling and at least become familiar with bouncing yourself off yourself, and then maybe it's inviting someone who's a friend, or then whatever it is, like you're on your own journey, right? So, but the key thing here to me seems to be that you just need to really be really raw and open. Like, what is it you're pretending not to know? Like, that's one of the questions I find so effective when I work with my clients. Like, what are you pretending not to know here? Like, maybe you think this is good for you, maybe you think that person's good for you, but your instincts and your emotions, they're the channel. They're the channel that tell us what's right, what's wrong, what we should do more of, what we should do less of. Now, I'm conscious of the time, so let's there's a few things I wanted to ask, but I could have this conversation forever. So let me just let's finish it up on, I wanted to kind of leave people with maybe 2, maybe 3 practical things, if they've like resonated with any part of your story, which I think we all probably can to some level. What are 2 practical things that you would give to people to just get started if they haven't already on this self-discovery journey and everything?
I think definitely journaling. I think that's a really, really powerful way to kind of, whether you write a letter back to your younger self, or write a letter to perhaps the people that have hurt you. So you might have hurt yourself, so you write a letter back to that person. Over the years, I've written so many letters to my mum, my dad, my aunt, and you don't give it to them. You could if you wanted to, but you either chuck it out, burn it, keep it, whatever you need to do. I still sometimes say I wish I kept my journals from when I was younger, but I did have a psychologist at one stage that told me to throw them all out because I did keep going over them, and it was, but at the time that's what I needed to do. So I had many a journal from when I was little. I mean, my dad was front page of the newspaper when he'd be arrested, and so it was crazy. And I had all that, and so
I can imagine the cutout picture. It's
like
a
a
really
cut out
creative
the
thing.
Newspaper,
It's like,
I'd stick it in my diary, and then I'd write to it. I'd love to go back and read it, but at the time I really needed to heal from that. So, that would definitely be number one. Journaling, whether to write letters to people, it's just huge. And a lot of people journal in their phone. I really think there's a lot of power to writing it out. So get pen and paper, go old school, go buy yourself a beautiful book and just write in it.
Yeah. Like I think just light a candle, get a book, maybe even if you like it. Yeah, incense. Like set yourself up an environment where you can really just be with yourself. And it doesn't have to be long. I think people think, oh no, I don't want to sit there for like an hour and blah, blah, blah. No, just do it. Trust me, once you first put that pen to paper, it's amazing how in the zone you'll get. Like I actually spent my New Year's Eve this year, like just journaling for I ended up like free writing for like 8 or something pages. And that was just, I wanted to map out my past year because I've had quite a difficult year, but then also where I'm at now and where I want to go. I had 8 pages of what happened this year. And then that was it. I just was like, I've spent like an hour and a half writing. I think I'm just happy with that for today.
Beautiful.
But it's amazing. Like once you just put pen to paper and free write, and I think there's from my studies, there is an understanding of like, okay, free write, be relentlessly truthful to yourself and throw it out.
Okay, so there is that psychology behind throwing it out.
Because the whole point of it is to get it out, and it kind of circles back through and you can make sense of it. But once you make sense of it, like you don't need to continue really reliving it. If you feel like there's some part of you that needs to go back and read it, maybe there's some part of you that needs to write it again. Wow. Because you should remember certain parts, but as you write down, little parts of you die off and little parts of you get to rebirth. So that's kind of the theory behind that. But
I like
that's why you can be really honest with yourself too, because you know that you're never going to read it again. No one else is going to read it. Let's just get all the gunk out.
Yeah, that's so true.
So what's your other tip?
So something I love is setting intention. So I love vision boards. So I even do sessions with some of my people sometimes where at Kmart you can get like half whiteboard, half corkboard. And on the corkboard side, I'll literally cut out magazines, cut out pictures, cut out words, and I set my intention, whether it be for the year, for 6 months. I never do more than a year. And so I went over to a girlfriend's house the other night. The 3 of us sat around with a glass of wine and our corkboard and magazines, and I just set the intention for the year. So I had a picture of a pregnant woman because I want to have a baby this year. I had a picture of a ring. We're going to get married. I had a picture of Hamilton Island because we're supposed to be going away. I have words, sort of have like sleep deeply to really focus on getting good sleep this year. If I have a baby, that might be contradictory, right? Good luck with that. In the past, it's been, I'm a big fan of network marketing. I had a picture of my team. I had, this year's your best year yet. I had your room lights up your aura lights up the room. So all the things that just kind of represent who you want to be this year and set your intention. So I think that's super, super powerful to dream. But also then it's a visual that you can see. So I have it in my bedroom and I can see it all the time. And then on the whiteboard, I have a prayer at the top, the prayer of Jabez, which I really love to kind of pray over myself all the time. And then I'll have somewhat actual specific goals. So how will I achieve those certain things, or by when do I want to achieve them by? I don't put monetary things or anything like that, but I had for the last couple of years I've had pay off my Invisalign, pay off my credit card, all those kinds of things. So I love visualization and I love setting intentions.
Yeah. Okay. And so within that though, I mean, you talk a lot about just like what it is you're trying to do, the positive stuff around that and what I'm trying to make myself. But do you have anything there that says, okay, well, when things get really hard, I will do X, Y, or Z, or like when things trigger me from the past, I'll do this or I'll do that?
I don't, and the only reason I don't do that is I try not to put anything of a negative context on there. So that, to me, and correct me if I'm wrong as a counsellor, but if I'm to see triggers or negative, or I used to have the amount of money I wanted to save, but I saw a lady in the UK last year and she was basically saying, you're every day reminding yourself of your debt. So why not just have on there to be debt free or to pay this off or something rather than the figure? Because that was really daunting to see that. So yeah, I try to do it more positive affirmation rather than any of the negative stuff. However, I did have, when Dylan and I broke up, I had all my non-negotiables and I had who he had to be. And it was a bit of it was to remind myself, but I also knew that when he was coming over, he would see it. It was a bit cheeky of me, I think, and I didn't realize it at the time. Again, I was trying to protect myself. But my psychologist said, you're telling this guy to live in this box, and if he steps out of it, and she's like, not really fair, is it? And I was like, fair, cool. And so now I have on the board the prayer, and then we have an open and loving relationship. So now every day he sees this board that says we have an open and loving relationship. So I'm not saying you have to live within my expectations in my box. I'm just saying that we have an open and loving relationship. And so that's a really nice positive way to put, like, to have that expectation and that intention rather than this. So yeah, otherwise we could have had, if you do this, I'm going to break up with you.
Yeah, I can't imagine that would be you'd be walking on eggshells all the time.
Yeah, and it's made a huge difference to our relationship just by having that different verbiage. Huge difference. We actually have a beautiful, open and loving relationship. Definitely there's our differences, and but we talk about it and we communicate, and it's just lovely.
Yeah, like I think the idea of when things get difficult, what will I do, is the realist side of me, where like it is great to be clear on where you're going and really try and be motivated every single day, but I mean it's inevitable. There's going to be days where you're feeling down. I mean, yesterday I actually slept until this is the first time in probably 2 years that I slept this long. I slept till 2 p.m. yesterday.
Oh wow.
And the last week that I had, I was just doing lots of really cool things and really sociable and all that stuff, and that's I didn't get adequate sleep, and so then I overslept, and then yesterday I was just so just down, and I didn't want to do anything, and I felt really guilty for that, but I was like, no, that's okay, it's just a day, that's merely a blip on the lifespan, so just kind of relax, do what you need to do for yourself to regain your strength, regain your vitality, and then pick yourself back up again tomorrow. It's a new day.
And I think that could be the third point, that check in with yourself. Where do I need to be today? Do I need to sleep till 2 o'clock? Do I need to put my head under the pillow and, or do I need to be out in the sunshine? Do I need to push myself, or do I just need to take a step back? I think for years I used to push myself, and like the soldier, it was a pushing, whereas now it's take time, breathe, pray, sing, sleep, whatever it is, do I need to go to the gym and absolutely pump it, or do I need to just chill?
Yeah.
Do I go do a yoga class, or do I not go at all? That's okay as well. And there can be that balance between pushing yourself. I always had this rule that if you didn't want to go to the gym but you went, if you're not into it in 10 minutes, just go home. There's no point, but if you usually within 10 minutes you start to feel pretty good about it.
Showing up's 90% of the battles.
It's so hard. So I'll say that again, always get your gym gear out the night before, put it there on the table ready to go, you wake up in the morning and you go. It's the best. I'm a massive advocate of that, but I think checking in with yourself often and going, okay, why did I sleep till 2? Am I okay? Do I need to seek a friend's help, or do I need to talk about this, or was it just a day I needed to sleep? Pick yourself up, And sometimes having a week of, I know I'm really drained after I'm around people, really drained, and sometimes I just need to take a step back. I've been loving reading lately. I've been reading a lot, and so that's been a really big kind of self-love time that I'm giving to myself, and then just making sure I'm reading the right things as well. So
reading stuff that helps you motivate you as well. And,
totally.
Okay, cool. All right, look, I would love to continue this never-ending conversation, and I'm sure we've only really scratched the surface, but thanks for being here. And obviously, if people want to know more about your story, they can go to...
so my book is for sale on heartandwillow.com.au, which is my boutique store. If you want to go to my podcast, it's The Evolved Lifestyle. If you want to go to my Instagram, it's RochelleNicole.lifestyle. So that's it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much again. And I wish you all the best. Godspeed.
Thank you.
Well, there it is, guys. Thanks so much for listening all the way through till the end. I have no doubt that if you made it to the end, you've taken really a couple of gems out of this story and really been able to implement some little practical tips maybe into your life, or just some new ways of thinking and new perspectives on life. So thanks for making it to the end. Remember to like, share, follow, tell a friend, do everything you can to get our message out there. Hopefully we can keep having a positive influence on the world. So thanks, guys. Stay tuned for next week's episode.